Today I'm here with Ashira, who is a detransitioned woman who lives in Israel. So we're on a bit of a time delay here. It's morning for me and evening for you. Thank you for joining me, and I appreciate you being willing to share your story. So Ashira, when did you first start sort of identifying as transgender?
I was about 17 when I had the word for transgender. I felt different before that, but I didn't have like a particular word for it. Um, and I took intro to psych in high school. And, you know, during that time, as a teenager, obviously, everybody goes through like changes and doesn't quite understand themselves. And I happen to be also autistic. I was diagnosed with that later in my life, like 5 years ago. But at the time, I didn't know that. And so to me, different was like what I went with. And so when I learned in psychology or intro to psych, that people with like gender problems felt different, then that was like, oh, wow, well, I feel different. So that's when I started identifying as trans.
That's interesting that you had later gotten a diagnosis with autism, because we hear about the rates of people with autism who are going to these gender clinics is really astronomically high. And I'm guessing it's because people with autism tend to, first of all, think in black and white. And so if you don't fit into stereotypes of gender, then it seems like it'd be really easy for you to assume you were transgender.
Yeah.
So
Well,
growing up,
on top of that, a thing about autism is that, at least for high functioning autism, people tend to have like obsessions. So when they get into something, it's like really into something, and they'll do all sorts of like research, and it can like really, and they convince themselves also. And so I convinced myself that that I was absolutely trans, like that's what I needed to do. And yeah.
and so were you gender nonconforming when you were younger, or would you just say you were kind of quirky and didn't fit in?
I would say I was pretty just I was a tomboy for sure. Um, and like most of my friends were guys. But I wouldn't say gender nonconforming. Like I loved horses. I did ballet for a while. My favorite color was purple. So
And it would make sense to me that you would have more friends that are boys, because um, I have I have been diagnosed as being on the spectrum as well, and I think for girls who are on the spectrum, it's really hard to get along with other girls,
yeah,
because there is this difference in how we engage in the world. So when you were 17, did you start pursuing medical transition, or did you socially transition, or can you
I socially transitioned really quickly. I after I decided that I was trans, I well first off I like moved out. My dad and I had like a big fight, and I moved out and lived with a friend for a while, and then I lived on my own, and there was like a whole um, I keep trying to in my head I like use Jewish words like balagan and kolkach, but I'm like, oh, people don't understand this. Um,
Was the fight
but
because
there's
he didn't
like a
accept you being
whole
transgender?
pardon.
Was the fight because you came out as
Yeah,
transgender?
yes. So yeah, it was like a whole mess, and I went through like a lot. And I didn't start medically transitioning until about 19. I did, so like I said, it was really quick for social transitioning. After I moved out, I went back to my high school and was like, now I go by Callum. And people were like mostly okay with it. I was like friends with a lot of my teachers, and they were, you know, happy for me and everything. And also like my friends' parents, because I was like not weird, but like different. People were like, oh, that makes sense. So yeah, it was really quick. And then I moved out to live with my mom for a bit. And when I was there, I started seeing a gender therapist, specifically because I'm really resourceful with the internet. And so all I did was like Google gender therapist in Calgary, and that was how that happened. Um, And yeah, after like 3 sessions, I got my um, permission slip or whatever for transitioning medically for hormones. And so I started in 2013 on testosterone. And it wasn't until 2015 or 2016 actually that I had any surgeries.
And what surgeries did you have?
I had a top surgery, and unfortunately, I had a hysterectomy and an oophorectomy. So I can't have babies
So did you do those
until
at the same time,
Mhm.
or
No. I did. Oh, do you mean the hysterectomy and the oophorectomy?
the
Or
top
yeah.
surgery? Yeah, the
So the top surgery
mastectomy.
I did in May of 2016, and the hysterectomy, oophorectomy I did in 2017 in September.
Okay, and it seems like you're still pretty young. So I am not really good with numbers, but I'm guessing you were still in your early 20s when you had these surgeries.
Yeah. I was 24, I think, or 23 when I did top surgery, and actually, yeah, it would have been 23, and 24, almost 25 when I had our. Hang on, I'm gonna do the math again. um, so or 22 or 23 actually when I had top surgery, and then almost 24 when I had my hysterectomy.
Still really pretty young. So
Yeah.
so I'm assuming that when you started the testosterone that felt like the appropriate treatment if you went on to get surgeries.
Yes. I had like dreams and stuff where I, would dress female or something, and that made me kind of like think that, oh no, maybe I'm not really trans, so therefore I had to like really like go into it even more, because I'm like a little bit of a um, rebellious person, I guess. um, so like if something like that comes up, then I have to like dive into it even more. Um, so I started having like real second thoughts shortly before my hysterectomy,
Oh wow.
and yeah. um, and I went through it with it anyway because I felt that like I needed to make a decision then and there, and so I ended up going through with it, and really regretting it. And I spoke with my rabbi about whether I should detransition, whether it's possible for me to like have a Jewish marriage, um, like with someone who's the opposite of me, or like with another woman. Not because like I was into women, but just because like for the heteronormative aspect of it, as I'm Orthodox. Um, so, and he said no, and so I was like, well, then I have to detransition. But I didn't for a while. Um, in the Jewish community, there's like very strict gender roles for Orthodox and for Orthodox women and men. So uh, being like losing the status of Orthodox man was uh, difficult for me, because like in not in like, I don't know, it's difficult to say, but like there's men are kind of like more valued in a way, not like in like a super sexist way, but just like the, what do you call it, commandment to like learn Torah and everything is on men, and also like there's time bound commandments that they have to do, and those things are like uh, tenets, I guess, in the Jewish community. Whereas for women, we don't have like time bound or commitments. We just like pray when we need or when like we want to, and we don't have to like learn Torah.
So the men
So
have more responsibility, religious
yes,
responsibility.
yeah,
What's
it,
interesting to me though is that you are actually functioning as an Orthodox male Jew.
I will. I mean, actually, not so much. I mean, I was at the time. I didn't. I wasn't really afforded, so I was like allowed to be in the space. by the people who like knew that I was like my rabbi knew that I was transgender, and obviously, like I said, um, and so did some other rabbis in my community, and they allowed me to be with the men and everything, and pray on their side of the mechitza, which is the divider. Um, but I didn't count in terms of like the minyan, which is having 10 Jewish men. And I didn't count in terms of having like an aliyah to the Torah. So like I couldn't read Torah on like Saturdays and everything. Um,
So you were sort of like
so
halfway.
yeah, like I was a guest on the other side, basically.
Interesting. And to
Um,
me that's,
yeah,
I mean, in some ways I think, wow, that's so enlightened. But in other ways, I just think, especially seeing what's happening to kids, that it's like, oh no,
yeah.
even we have, Orthodox Jewish rabbis who are reinforcing this ideology now.
So, I mean, they weren't so much. It actually took a long time for them to accept it. Um, I mean, the first time I came to Israel, actually, I was kind of running away from the community because they told me that I couldn't be on the men's side. If I wanted to daven with them, I could in the morning, but I had to be behind the mechitza, and that was like really embarrassing for me, obviously. Um, so like I left, and I wanted to just like do my own thing. Um, and the whole 6 degrees of separation that is like in the non-Jewish community, it's more like 2 in the Jewish community, so that didn't last very long. But after I came back from Israel, my rabbi, he got a uh, what do you call it? Not an exception, but like they said an allowance letter or whatever, permission from like a big rabbi, a rav, for me to daven with or to pray with the other men. So it took a while, but they eventually let me. Um, so it's not so much like they are accepting of it or anything like that. More like if they have someone who looks like a man and identifies as a man, as long as they like look like it, they wouldn't like allow someone who's just like um who identifies but like didn't transition or anything. They wouldn't do that. I
So did you have your surgeries in Canada or in Israel?
in Canada.
Okay, so they were covered by the health
Yeah,
service there.
totally. Yeah,
Wow. So that's to me also something interesting, because I feel like just the fact that those options are available without having to invest a whole lot of your own money makes it so much easier just to kind of go with it.
yeah, it really does. I think that when you get something for free, it's easier to just like not really think of it. I was actually on like the wait list as well for like the more what do you call it, construction type of,
Phalloplasty.
yeah, yeah. So yeah.
So after you had the hysterectomy, you said you felt regret. What
Yeah.
what was that like?
It's crushing. Like um I mean, I tried to like join support groups and stuff on Facebook, and they wouldn't accept me because I might turn women off of hysterectomies if they had them. Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just, I don't know, like it feels like I did a terrible thing. Like I like it's something that I can't take back, and technology is getting better every day, but like who knows how long it'll be until it's like readily available for women, especially women who weren't like born without like a uterus, etc. um and yeah, it's just like not bewildering, but it's like I'm in denial sometimes, like
Well, and I think that if you're like a lot of women, I mean, a lot of women do not really think about having kids. They're not very interested in having kids at all until they get a
mhm,
little bit older. And I think, um, if the option is to remove your fertility when you're younger, a lot of women might do that and have those regrets. I know I was just reading an article about Kira Bell, who's in England, and she's currently suing the NHS there because she's worried that she's compromised her fertility with the puberty blockers and testosterone she was on. I don't think she went so
Mhm.
far as to getting a hysterectomy and oophorectomy, but she did have her breasts removed, and she just feels that huge loss. And it wasn't until she got a little bit older that she sort of had this sense of what she had forfeited.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what
Um,
motivated you to detransition after sort of committing so much to this transition?
so becoming Israeli was like a difficult situation. So like I said before, I had talked to my rabbi about the possibility of having like a Jewish family and a Jewish marriage as a trans person. And he went to like multiple ravs as well, like big rabbis that are like really knowledgeable in Jewish law. And the answer came back is like, no, not really. And that was like crushing to me as an Orthodox Jew.
So your option was
So
to be a single male passing Jewish or to detransition and have the opportunity to get married. Is that
so technically I also could like become less religious. Um, but to me that's like not so much an option. But yeah, so functionally those are the options. On top of that, I mean, like I said before, like the reason that it took me so long to do that was because I felt I didn't want to give up being a male Jew. But somewhere within that, I kind of stopped going to synagogue on like a daily basis, and even for like for like Saturday and for like the holidays, I didn't really go. And the punishment for being transgender, or at least for like cross-dressing, etc., in the Torah is karet, which is being cut off from the nation. And I realized I was like kind of doing that to myself anyway. So um, like it's not like worth it. So I decided that I didn't want to do that anymore. I also the whole time I was stealth, so like nobody knew that I was transgender except for like really close friends and my rabbi. Um, and it really weighed on me to like not be able to like really commit to like new friendships and everything because I was so afraid of like coming out to people and like being rejected, or just like them knowing in general, even if they weren't going to reject me, I just felt that they would like treat me differently. So that whole like having to carry that secret, and also like the religious uh sorry um consequences, I guess the religious consequences, they kind of like drove me to it. But the real like um straw that broke the camel's back was when I was becoming Israeli, and had to go through like the whole process of getting the like a permission slip from the gender change council. Sorry, I always forget the name. Um, and going through all that and having to like give them every piece of, what do you call it, documentation from my transition, from like the reports from my surgeries to like the original letter from my gender therapist way back when, and my name change and all that stuff that was like years back past. And I was like, what am I doing? I feel so stuck. It's been 7 years since I like started this, but I'm still like, what am I doing? And it took from I like got all that stuff in like August, and it took until December for them to like process it. And between then and like the September and getting it, I just like I realized that I didn't want it anymore, and the only thing that was like really defining me as male was the fact that I dressed male and I had payot, or side locks,
uh-huh.
and a beard. And I was like, well, then what's the point? And I was working also at a religious organization, so I didn't want to like come out to them, and I decided in the December that if I didn't have an Israeli status by the time, like it was arbitrary, it was like by next Wednesday, then I'm gonna go back to Canada. I'm gonna start detransitioning immediately.
Wow.
Um, and if I do, then I am gonna start detransitioning by June. And so the next day, I got a call from my Aliyah advisor who said that I'd been accepted to become Israeli, and so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna do it before June. And like I said, I was afraid of like coming out while working in this organization, but I started. I shaved my beard, and I kind of, I mean, I started wearing like a hat instead of like a kippah just because I felt weird about wearing men's religious items. And yeah, and then when Corona came and I got laid off, so I wrote a Facebook post saying that I'm so sorry that I didn't tell anyone, but I've been trans for the past like almost decade, and I'm detransitioning.
Wow.
And thank God everyone was like very accepting of it. And yeah,
Were people surprised?
people were pretty surprised. Yeah, people were like, "What? I had no idea."
Well, and
And
that's why
for
I
like,
think, especially in the Jewish culture, and I forgive me because I don't know a lot about it,
oh yeah,
but what I do know is that, like you said, there are very strict um, dress codes. Even the hairlock things and the beards and
yeah,
stuff are sort of so associated with being male, and I'm sure there are certain things about being female. I'm not sure. Do you shave your head?
no, no.
Okay, because I know that there are some
There are
in the
some
U.S.
yeah,
There are
some like
some
very Orthodox women
right.
do, but I don't.
Okay.
Also, I'm not married yet, so
Oh, okay, right. And so were there any people who felt I don't know, like you had betrayed their trust or something?
I think that there were a few, especially like um, so I'm actually quite conservative, and so I have a lot of like right wing leaning friends, and so like some of them they did like delete me after, and they were like pretty rude about it on like Facebook later. But for the most part, people were like, "I'm just glad that you are healthy and happy with yourself." And yeah, for the most part, it was like a good
That's
group.
great that people were
Yeah.
supportive. So when you stopped taking the testosterone, was that a difficult time period? Because I've heard some people say it was that getting off testosterone can be really rough.
It was kind of like a necessity because I came with like 1.5 vials to Israel, and because I figured that it was still while I was toying with detransition at the time anyway. So I figured that either I would find a specialist or I wouldn't, and if I didn't, then um, it was better than I guess like considering like intentionally going off of it and like starting on estrogen right away, because like I said, when I was like first deciding whether or not I would detransition, it was something that was like very difficult for me. But when it came to like actually going off of testosterone, like not really. It wasn't such a thing. I mean, ever since I had my hysterectomy, I've had like um hot flashes and stuff like that, and like general discomfort. And so like it wasn't any change with or on testosterone versus off. That's just been like a constant.
So did you
But
decide to go on estrogen and progesterone at some point to replace?
yes, I actually have a what do you call it, an appointment with an endocrinologist later this month.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
God.
So you haven't started that yet because that will help with the hot flashes and all that.
I hope so.
Yeah. That's you're so young to be sort of basically in menopause right now.
Yeah.
And those hormones are important for your body. So I'll be curious to see how you adjust to them because it has been a while. So
Yeah.
I'll be curious to see. But I'm glad that you have that appointment, and hopefully you can get
Yeah.
support there.
One thing that I liked about the Canadian health system versus Israeli is that when you want like an endocrinologist appointment, it usually happens within like a few weeks. And here I made the appointment back in like July,
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah.
A little bit
So
slower.
yeah.
So since you've been off testosterone, have you had many physical changes?
Yeah, I mean, my voice obviously is pretty deep, and I had a beard, like I said. Um, I mean, actually, except for the facial hair, I didn't have like so much hair growth elsewhere. I guess my body wasn't like super um for or super um receptive to testosterone. I stayed kind of androgynous,
Okay.
which for better or for worse. It was really frustrating for me when I was identifying as trans, because I felt like I was basically um, almost a woman. And now, I mean, my shoulders are kind of wide, and I never had like super wide hips, but I guess like it's not like too bad. I definitely, people see me as a woman for the most part, so unless when I talk.
Are you thinking about getting breast augmentation, or are you comfortable with how you look?
um I think I might, but I'm not sure. Right now I like stuff my bra. um but I wouldn't if it weren't for like a few weeks ago some customer like misgendered me, but not like completely. um it was more like maybe she thought she was being respectful or something if I was like trans, but like she's like she told her kid, oh, he'll get you water, wait, or she'll, right? And I was like, yeah, obviously I'm wearing like a long skirt and I have long hair and I have my hair like very obviously. So yeah, like since then I started stuffing my bra. And uh and I don't know, it's been nice, I guess, but like I don't know, part of the reason also that I transitioned was I had like trauma between my 16th and 17th, or 17th and 18th birthdays. I like hitchhiked across Canada and bad stuff happened. um
So,
but
so were you sexually traumatized?
yeah.
Because that's another
um
thing that I hear so often is that girls have sexual trauma and then pretty quickly afterwards decide to transition. And
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what happened to me. My desire to be a boy was definitely directly a result of being sexually assaulted. And
yeah,
so um, if you're like me, like a lot of the other women and young women and older women that I've talked to, um, sometimes they feel like their body betrayed them and
yeah,
have a lot of anger at their, especially female body parts, because they felt
yeah,
like they were betrayed by them. Is that how you felt?
yeah, essentially. So yeah, I wouldn't necessarily, if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't necessarily get a chest augmentation, but because um, for the sake of like not being like misgendered, at least while I'm still working on things like my facial hair and my voice, um, it would be like better.
So when you look back on it, do you do you view your transition as a coping mechanism? Do you feel like you had like a mental health issue? Do you feel like you were born in the wrong body? Like, what is your sort of narrative? Because I hear all different kind of interpretations from detransitioners.
I have like three different thoughts. First off is that I may have like a male soul in a female body, and that doesn't mean that I had to transition. um, it's not unheard of in like Judaism for that to happen. So and people just like deal with it. And that was one of the reasons why I felt it was okay to detransition also, is because I realized that like God gave me a female body and I can work with that. um, and yeah, but so that as well as, like I said, the autism thing. I think that as a kid, it was difficult for me to communicate in general. Not in terms of like being verbose, I was very verbose, but in terms of like my feelings and my inner world, could not communicate. So having some way to identify what was wrong
Mhm.
was a reason that I, what do you call it, turned to transgenderism, and also like the trauma.
And it's so much easier, I think, for girls who don't fit in to to fit in as males, because I
Hmm.
think that you can be kind of a quirky, weird male and you don't get as much flack. It's sort of like I view sort of quirky, weird females and effeminate males as sort of in the same
Hmm.
category, that they just aren't accepted well. And
Hmm.
so as a woman, if you're not getting along, if you have a hard time with this, especially relationships, because girls are so interested in these relationships, that transitioning can just make life easier, because those are difficult skills. Did you
Yep.
find life was just did you find it easier to navigate life as a male?
Um, yeah, I think so. I mean, um, I've always been like a little bit effeminate, and that was a problem in like some areas in terms of like, I was like homeless for like a year and a half, living in a shelter, and obviously being like an effeminate guy is like not such the best thing. Um, but like in terms of, being a Jewish male, it wasn't really an issue. Um, it was like pretty mainstream, I guess. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think that there, in terms of like communicating with people and in terms of like forming relationships, it was easier to do so as a guy. And also, I think that maybe in some way I felt that I was like protecting myself, but I'm not sure.
So just out of curiosity, what has motivated you to share your story publicly?
Um, what has, I don't know. I think that up until recently, there haven't been like a lot of detransitioners speaking out. And I think it's important for the trans community, for people considering transitioning, and for people who have like doubts in their minds who have already transitioned, to hear our stories, because they're all very different, and there are tons of reasons why people might have transitioned. There's tons of reasons why people might detransition, or like stay trans. If people can get past the um, what do you call it? The reasons why they're considering detransitioning, then that's like all for them, I guess. Um, but yeah.
And I'm just curious, because one of my reasons for having this channel and for speaking out is because I'm so concerned about what's happening with children. And you transitioned at a little bit older than a lot of these kids are, went through the surgery as an adult and still ended up regretting it. And
Yeah.
so, do you have any like advice that you would give to kids who are feeling like they're transgender?
Um, I think that nowadays a lot of people want to have like a box to fit in. Um, and it is taking away from the broader definition of what it means to be a male or what it means to be a female, to say that everyone who doesn't fit in an exact box is transgender. Um, I think that if I had had like better role models as a female, if I had like if I'd known about like characters like Anne of Green Gables, or like people like Carrie Brownstein, um, like all sorts of strong women, and girls, then I might have felt that it was okay to be like a atypical girl. Um, and yeah, I mean, just because you don't like pink, or don't do shopping, or that kind of thing, doesn't mean that you're not a girl. And especially for kids who like want to go through with like medical transition, just like most people, they learn to like accept themselves, um, especially if, I mean, there's like so many young kids who are considering going through transition like even before they do puberty, and it's uh it's really concerning.
Yeah.
um yeah, just like on a scientific level, like studies show that most, don't what do you call it, they don't stick to a transgender identity past like late puberty.
Yeah, usually
And
puberty is a cure.
exactly.
And one of the things that I was also curious about is if you ever got sort of help processing the trauma that you had, because I think because that's so important. Yeah, is that just not?
um for a long time it was difficult for me to even like talk about it. Like I didn't tell my dad until recently. And it happened like a long time ago. I told like very few people. I have like probably before my and before I told like a few more people like this year, I probably had like 5 or 6 people in my life that knew. um and yeah, so I haven't really processed it, but I've kind of like done like self-healing and stuff. And yeah.
Well, that's what I worry too, is that if kids are encouraged to transition when they do have underlying issues, that they
Mhm.
don't get a chance to process that and they're just going to carry it with them. Whereas like in your case, if your gender counselor had explored some other stuff with you, might have prevented you a lot of medical difficulties and really just struggles for what, 6 or 7, 8 years of your life.
Yeah. When I learned in that intro to psych class, they actually said that having Asperger's was a pre, like it precluded a diagnosis of gender identity disorder. So if that had also been like explored, I mean, like I said, I didn't have the diagnosis at the time, but if like if the gender therapist had been like a regular therapist instead of a gender therapist, then it could be we could have gone into that more, or into the trauma, or into just like why I would want to be a boy, because then I would have like said, well, all my friends are boys, and they probably would have said, well, that doesn't mean that you're a boy. um, and yeah.
So most gender therapists will just say, "Oh, of course you're a boy born in a girl's body," without
Yeah.
challenging that idea at all. And that's what's so concerning to me, is that when you have little kids who kind of grab onto this idea, especially kids who have autism, who have sexual assault or other traumas, who are gender nonconforming, that those are all sort of kind of predispositions towards not fitting in very well. And it seems like transgender and the whole transgender umbrella, the whole LGBT umbrella, sort of has is there for these kids to come under, and all of a sudden a kid who doesn't fit in very well has this whole community that just embraces them and celebrates them. Did you find that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, like I said before, I didn't so much like I associate myself with the transgender community. There are like some trans Jews that I talked to just on a what do you call it, on a level of like understanding the law around it, and for getting like resources out here. Um, but beyond that, like not really. Um, but yes, definitely in terms of when I was in high school, definitely there was a lot of support. And actually when I was homeless, there was a lot of support as well, um, as like a trans person.
So as we're finishing up, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't talked about yet?
um, I don't think so.
I'm just really impressed with, it seems like you have sorted it out really well. That as I talk to you, it seems like you have, you don't have a lot of angst. It seems like you're pretty well grounded. Do you feel that way?
I think, yeah, I feel really good having detransitioned.
That's awesome. And it sounded like you have a boyfriend,
Yeah,
and so you have some support.
yeah. Thank God. I also have like so many friends, and I still, I mean, yeah. Um,
I was
even
just
a
wondering
lot
where
of
you
the,
are
pardon?
where you are, is there much backlash? Because I know in the US when people come out detransitioning, a lot of times they're actually not treated well and their community turns their back on them. A lot of times they lose a lot of friends. It doesn't sound like that particularly happened to you, but do you feel like the climate in Israel is warm and welcoming to your story, or do you feel a little bit shy about it?
Um, I think for the most part they're pretty warm and welcoming, especially because I detransitioned. I think that if it had been the other way around, then maybe not so much.
Okay.
Just because, like, obviously, uh, being sorry, it's the Jewish terms again. Um, being or coming like back to being religious. We say chazar b'tshuva after like being not religious, um, or like doing something that isn't compatible with being religious. Um, obviously is like the goal. Like we want everyone should be like mitzvah or commitment observant, and so if someone used to have a past that wasn't too compatible with being religious, um, then they'll be like celebrated for like not being that anymore.
Yeah, that makes a
But
lot of sense.
yeah,
It's sort of like um, celebrating that you're on a healthier path.
yeah, yeah, definitely.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your story with us, and I'm hoping that it will help others because especially that autism element is so important. Um, there's autism in my family, and there's this, for people who don't know, there's a tendency to perseverate. You lock onto an idea and that's the answer. And that's just part of being autistic.
Yeah,
And so it sort of is the perfect gateway for kids who are autistic. And then you add on some of the other factors and it just it makes perfect sense at the time, but
yeah.
then in
So
retrospect.
then, like, yeah, once you get to, yeah. Oh, I did want to say something. So my brother decided that he also wanted to transition at some point. And I mean, he's also autistic, but there's also like, like depression and other things mixed in, and he doesn't have like or he didn't last time we talked anyway, have like a good life situation. And I told him that like the most important thing is to have everything sorted out in terms of like a job and education and like living in a good place and on your own and being happy in general, before transitioning, because even if like you're the one person who generally is or genuinely is like trans, um, then you have to, in order for transition to make you happy, then those things also have to be in a line. And there are so many people who think that if they just transition, then all of a sudden they'll be happy. Like everything else is just going to go away. All the like financial trouble or the fact they don't have an education or a job, like that'll all somehow align. But it doesn't. The most important thing is to make sure that everything else, in terms, especially in terms of mental health, is good first.
Well, and especially in your case, I think illustrates that where you went on testosterone and that wasn't quite enough. So you had a mastectomy and that wasn't quite enough. So you had the hysterectomy. And I hear that a lot, that there's sort of this, well, if I just do more, if I just pass better, if I just somehow transition all the way, then
Mm-hmm.
then my problems will go away. And it's interesting because I've talked to plastic surgeons and they basically say that it's really against their ethic to perform surgery on someone who thinks that the surgery is going to solve all their problems. And yet with transitioning, there are a lot of people who believe that it will solve their problems. And I really like what you said, that, there's no other case where a surgeon would provide cosmetic surgery for someone who was suicidal or depressed or really anxious, that they would say,
Mhm.
you know what, you got to get your mental health sorted out first and then come back and talk to me. So I think that's
Yeah.
really good advice, that, get everything else in order. And then if you still want to give it a try, it's interesting because there's a debate right now, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but just in the last couple of weeks, there's been sort of a huge debate about the term true transgender,
Yeah.
because there are people who suggest that if you say that there's such a thing as somebody who's true transgender, then every kid is going to think they're the one. And
Yeah.
so I try to stay away from that language, but I do believe that what you're trying to say is that there are people who are just going to, it's just going to match themselves better to
Yeah.
present differently.
Yeah.
And wait till you're an adult, get everything sorted out, and that's when you should try it, not when you're a child or even a young adult.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your sharing your story. It's been really good talking to you.